And our last talk for today will be with Pedro Moraes. Did I pronounce it correctly? Your
Yeah,
last
sure.
name?
I mean, doesn't really matter, I guess.
Okay. Your work deals with the topic of energy production, but energy can be understood quite wide. Can you tell us a bit about the work and how this comes together?
Yeah, sure. So this piece is actually, let's say, the documentation of a previous work that was developed in a residency in Barcelona in 2016. And in relation to this, like, let's say, original work in Barcelona, there was something which was a specific historical site that was of interest. It was a former power plant that was 100 years ago in 1919, very important for the consolidation of labor laws in Spain. And like usually we understand energy as a kind of, as like instrumental to technical development, and technical development as instrumental to societal and cultural development. But in this case, it was the cessation of production of energy that brought about this kind of cultural, let's say, improvement. So I was very interested in the way that this particular site kind of reversed this schema that we understand, how we understand this schema usually. So like in relation to what you see here at the Kunsthalle, I think the point was to do something else that related very much with the idea of energy in like very practical terms, like the production of energy and its consequences, both in the sense of like practical consequences, but also it's kind of, well, let's say practical in the sense of like everyday, but also practical in the sense of like what will come if we keep as we are, I guess. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah, okay.
The work is based on a publication you made last year.
Yeah.
But the publication is a different mean, kind of. You wouldn't exhibit the publication as it is, right? You would use it as a different tool.
Yeah, I think like my interest in making a publication is it's very practical. Oh, sorry. My interest in making a publication was very practical in the sense that like a publication circulates by itself. It's not dependent on the institutionalized art world. So in my mind, it was very much a strategic decision to make something that could circulate independently of being invited into exhibition contexts or not. And I think it was kind of, yeah, I mean, I think it was like in a kind of very brief conversation with Nicolaus that the idea of making into a quote-unquote wallpaper came about, and I think it makes a lot of sense for this context. But it's if you've never seen anything that I made, you come here and you're like, oh, this guy makes like images. But I think that's kind of, yeah, it's interesting because the book was made as a book, and here it very much becomes like a kind of like artwork.
And would you say that this kind of distribution of ideas and art is something that can be understood political, or that you can be used in a political way?
Oh, in which sense?
Like to not have the institution you have to rely on to like present ideas, but also to use different channels.
Yeah, like I think a lot of my work deals with that and the sort of like the politics of it, because I'm very wary of art and its institutions. I think it's kind of weird to say this here, but but like, yeah, I'm very wary of its ability to like engender change in the world. So I constantly feel that as an artist, my work is also to try to escape from this context. And I think that like making a book is definitely a way. Like putting posters in the bathroom in a similar way. I feel it relates to that because, yeah, maybe I should speak like briefly because I think that's something that like downstairs there are two bathrooms, like a ladies' room and a gentleman's room, and I put some posters on them as a kind of extension of the two panels that are upstairs, and these are kind of related to the content of the panels, but they are also kind of more or less like a group show. I invited 6 artists to send me images of their work, and in these posters it has information that it comes from the book, but the images come from these other artists' work. And in these posters you will find barcodes and QR codes, and if you read the QR codes with your phone, it will take you to these artists' website. So in a certain sense, I'm sort of like extending like my sort of institutional opportunity, if I can say it like this, to these artists as a kind of gesture of redistributing these resources, because like in a certain sense, this is a very scarce resource.
Do you think art has a responsibility to be political?
I think art is political no matter what, just in the sense of like, at least the way that I understand politics is yeah, like art is embedded in an economic system that it's like in its own turn is embedded in a political system, and our economical decisions are the result of political decisions that are made through our representatives. So in that sense, of course, I think art is very much embedded in the system, and I think like not necessarily as artists, because I don't think that artists have like a different responsibility than human beings. I think as like human beings, we are inherently political and inherently responsible.
I think that was a beautiful sentence to finish.
I was going to say that, but it was kind of like maybe I dropped the mic.